My name is Summer Bybee. But this is mostly for my friends and family anyways, so I don't know why I felt the need to announce that. I'm going to take a sip of coffee. I've been going over my descent from faith, and I have wanted to write about it. However, I wanted to make the human connection of a video vlog, if you will, kind of highlighting some of it. I thought maybe if I don't know, just connected my face with the story, and I know that my words and the writing form are very powerful also. So I will do that as well, but I wanted to start here. So I do have my laptop over here because I made some bullet points to keep me on topic. We are actually going to start with, I have my phone like connected to a thing, connected to a thing, connected to a thing. So I'm just gonna put my coffee on the ground, and hopefully I don't waste a bunch of time by doing things like that. I'm kind of nervous. I've been nervous talking about this before, so I just want to gather myself for a minute here and focus on the point of describing, kind of how I got here right now, how I left faith, and where I am right now in my faith. So in June 2012, I remember this. Also, I have help because I do keep pretty good log of my life on Facebook, so I can literally search titles, book titles and stuff, and kind of find out at what point I read that book or whatever, because it'll come up in my newsfeed. So in 2012, I started studying the Old Testament. I did a really deep study of the Old Testament just means covenant, the Old Covenant and the New Covenant, and when I believe that when Christ came back and died for our sins, that the scripture stating that he did not come to abolish the law, but to fill it, and that essentially his love and what he did for us was a fulfillment of the law, and fulfillment, completion, that the law was not abolished or just gotten rid of, but that it wasn't needed in that form anymore, that it was completed. So while we still could look at things in the Old Testament morally, even though much of it is just brutal and anything but moral, that's another topic for another time though. But our Old Testament God, this is where some of those questions started for me. Our Old Testament God is one of jealousy and anger and vengeance, and that never felt like God to me, ever. When I read the Old Testament, I have read the whole Bible. When I read the Old Testament, I didn't connect with it. I wanted to find out how Jesus, who was so loving and more like me, as far as like connecting with him, not like I'm like Jesus, but that human being seemed so much more like God than God of the Old Testament. So this really, really got my wheels turning. And so as I was studying the Old Testament, I'll get back to the God of the Old Testament, the God of the New Testament. So in June of 2012, I actually published on my Facebook, so you could even look it up. It's in my notes, my take on a flawed teaching, which is about tithe. I remember being very disturbed by teachings in my church about being cursed if you didn't tithe, that if you didn't cut off the head of the snake, the master of money, the monster of money, before you gave your tithes, then all of your finances would be cursed and other curses would come upon you. And that just, it never sat with me. I was always one of those tithe until it hurts tithe even if it's all that you have and you can't pay your bills. I was that person, right? But as I was studying the Old Testament, I discovered that the tithe was for a different purpose in the Old Testament, and it was something that the priesthood did. And even though we were a new priesthood, that we were not called to that same law because it was very specific for a specific people. And it really started to bother me that we were calling this law in our church, even though it wasn't a law for us at this time. What we were called to do was to give cheerfully. And so I don't think giving to church is wrong. I think that it's wrong to tell your believers that if they do not tithe, and if they do not tithe 10% before they give taxes or anything, that they're being cursed. That is where I drew the issue. So I believe that tithe in and of itself is wrong. I believe that we should support our clergy. Well, I'm not in church anymore or even a part of the faith, but at the time, that is what I believe, that you should give cheerfully and give with your whole heart and not begrudgingly. And like, that was a big deal to me. And I believed that if the church would embrace that they would actually receive more from their congregation, because you would be giving out of your blessings instead of giving out of your pain, instead of expecting your poor believers to not pay their light bills and then someone else to pay their light bill and calling that God's blessing, to actually take care of the poor, which is a book that I started reading also. There was definitely a chapter in there in Pagan Christianity by Viola and George Barna. And I embraced a lot of Frank's teachings because they were parallel to what I was studying and understanding. Pagan Christianity pointed out a lot of things in the church that I wanted to see differently. I really wanted to see community and organic church happening. And I was feeling very frustrated with authority. As a woman who wanted to teach and who was going through a painful time with my husband, I didn't have a covering because he physically abused me. And all I wanted ever was to be a teacher in the church, to lead and direct and to grow people. That was so important to me, and it was my whole entire heart. I led a drama team at my church. I was a youth leader. I led worship in the youth. There were things that I did over the years where I got to impact the youth, and that meant everything and still means everything to me. Teaching and growing people is still my whole heart. So I'm getting a little bit off topic here. So June 2012, I discovered that tithing is bullshit and I'm pissed about it. And I want to talk to leadership, and everybody's kind of shutting me down, and what they will talk about is like in circles, and I can't actually sit down and have a conversation with anybody. I'm running into some things online. I reach out to my old youth pastor and I ask him to, like, for real, have a serious conversation with me about tithe, because what I'm learning about it is contradictory, and I really need somebody to tell me, like, I'm either crazy, missing the mark, and no one would do that. So then that made me really feel like I must have a really damn good point here if no one will even talk to me about it. Either that or they see me as contentious, stirring up division, and I'm going to get black sheeped in the church. I knew it was either one or the other. So I didn't want to cut ties with the church or anything. I wanted to change the church in the best way and move forward. I wanted us to be a body of believers and in faith, and knowing that, like, God would fulfill all of our financial needs, but we don't need to tell his people that they're cursed to get it done. In fact, the opposite would happen. If we all believed that God would take care of us financially, then that's what would happen. But we needed to take care of our poor. We needed to take care of our widows. And we needed to, like, that's what the whole point of tithing was in the Old Testament anyways. Like, when you look at what the tithes were used for and the way they were sectioned out, like, I urge you, if you don't get anything out of this and you're still in the church and you're still tithing and believing that you're being cursed, let go of that. Let go of that curse. Let go of that fear. Let go of all that shit, because that's what it is. It's control and manipulation, and it's not cool, and it's unnecessary, and the leadership in the church needs to get a handle on that. They don't need to be speaking that their people are cursed. Jesus came to break the curse, and we bind our believers. And that's my biggest, like, I'm already feeling like goosebumps and passion, because I can't handle that. I'm so tired of seeing a people bound by fear. I can't handle it. I cannot handle that. I won't walk in it. It's never, ever going to be a part of my life. Fear will never control me, period. And I hate to see people under that. Fear is bullshit. Anyways, that leads me to my next thing. Because I was deeply studying the difference between love and fear. Perfect love casts out all fear. And I have always held on to that. I still believe that to this day. I think that it is so real and so true, and that love is the opposite of fear. Faith is not the opposite of fear. Faith does not drive out fear. Love does. Pure fucking love is what drives out fear. This gets a little, because I talked about my husband a little bit, so I want to point that out because that is my ex-husband. That is a kind of a part of my story, even though I don't think it directly impacted my faith. I think people think that it did. So I was already discovering all of these things. Then November 4th, 2013, my Christian husband tossed me into our bedroom door and left me with 10 stitches and 2 scars on my face. This was not ever directly a reason I left the church, but certainly the complete breakdown of me as a person and the timing of my studies of church. It deserves to be addressed, especially for those who thought that I was hurt when I left the church or that I was angry with God or something. I was not angry with God. I was not angry that something had happened to me. I'm not one of those people. I always have taken the lessons in life with stride, like whatever, this is what I have to go through to be a better me, and I'm cool with it. I'll deal with it. I was definitely a broken human being, and I was studying all these things at that time. Do I think that the church might have kind of dropped the ball a little bit on reaching out to me and being a part of my life? Yes. But do I think that they were maybe afraid of the things that I had to say too? Also, yes. And I was extremely open about what we were going through. So slightly prior to this, before that happened, because I did share a lot of that. And this is kind of a little bit off topic, but I just believe that kind of being open part of that is a part of the process. So one thing that my ex-husband and I dabbled in before all of this, not before I started studying these things, but kind of in the middle of it, which was also a crisis for me, was he signed us up for a swingers website. And I remember feeling like I might lose my husband and trying everything that I could to connect with him, to help him heal sexually, to find out whatever I needed to do to be a better partner, because I was feeling very connected to him and still in love. But at the same time, I was trying to reason how this fit into our lives. And I found Christian swinging websites. And so I was rationalizing that. And to this day, I do have a much more open sexual idea about relationships and life and stuff. So that wasn't, in my opinion, a bad thing. Although the Christian people obviously look at that as part of me leaving faith, or leaving faith so that I could do those things. I think a lot of people look at my life now and they say she curses, she gets drunk sometimes, Lord have mercy, and those things, and they think I left faith so that I could sin freely without guilt or shame. But that is not at all how that went. I had already rationalized the swinging. I was writing blogs about Christian swingers and with Christian swingers, and I was really trying to connect the crisis in my life at that time. Okay, so he does that to me. We started swinging in June. He does that to me in November. In January, I read a book called Pagan Christianity, which I already touched on a little bit. Viola was touching on the most prominent issues I was having with the church, and I was ready to push boundaries. The chapter on Tithe really hit home, as I had already discovered that myself in 2012, and this was 2 years later. So I was stewing on it, already kind of feeling disconnected in the church when it came to those things, and I was looking for organic church because I wasn't finding what I needed in my leadership. And this was also breaking down my faith in the leadership that I had trusted, in the leadership that I was a part of. I was a huge part of all that. In February 2014, I read Love Wins by Rob Bell. This book is incredible. I was getting more information, and my questions about if hell existed or if it was actually created kind of more so out of a need for control and manipulation and to drive people more into fear rather than relationship with God really started to ring true for me after reading this book and really connecting what the word hell was in the Bible, the different descriptions of it, and it really, really uncovered and unveiled a lot of that for me. And I came away after reading that book, even though some people came away with a question that maybe hell doesn't exist, I came away with a hell does not exist. This fear crap has got to go. It doesn't exist. And I stopped thinking that. So this and the study of the New Testament and Old Testament. So when I was studying that, because I'm studying all of that as I'm studying this, like things are unfolding a little bit at a time. I'm putting my toe in here, my toe in there, and things are starting to make sense for me. And not make sense. More not make sense than make sense. You know, I'm discovering things, but I'm getting very frustrated because it's contradictory to what I've been taught my whole life. So I start to really question, like, why is the God of the Old Testament so angry all the time? And why is the God of the New Testament so different? Not even just Jesus, but God himself, God the Father, was just very different. He sent his Savior, and, you know, we hear a lot from Christ in the New Testament. And I love everything that he has to say. I still do. Jesus Christ's teachings are pretty amazing, and I love everything he taught me about love. Oh my God, love is like everything to me. So I really start to unravel those things, and I start to ask myself, why is the God of the Old Testament so angry, and why is the God of the New Testament just so very different? And what is the Old Covenant? Why would it? God is not supposed to change. We change, right? God is unchanging, but we change. So then I thought, if we change, maybe our view of God changed. If our view of God changed, maybe the Bible is more our view, relationship, understanding, discoveries of God than God's view through us, right? So then I started to kind of go, oh, this is interesting. So throughout this time, like before I'm divorced, but through that period where I'm kind of pretty broken, and I'm just trying to understand what the heck is going on in my life and how such a terrible thing has happened to me, but just keeping it all together at the same time for my children. I visited church once during that time. I was just really surviving the best that I could. But I started noticing that there was discrepancies, but they were not like these huge chasms in the Bible. It wasn't like a big deal. But I noticed like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all had different views of Christ and what happened at that time. And I started to think, like, how could God allow that? How could he allow Matthew to report something so very different from Mark? And then I was like, but it's the same story. And actually, are the details really that different? And then I was like, they're not really hugely different things. They just are through the perspective of the person who viewed them. So I start to think, though, then, is human experience part of the Bible? Yes, obviously. But like the written part of the Bible, because I viewed the Bible as just infallible in every way. It was written by God as far as I was concerned. So now it's not really written by God. Now I'm thinking it's written by man, by the inspiration of God. But that it starts to lose its power when I start thinking that, because I'm like, okay, so the Old Testament God is so angry and jealous and all these things because that's how we viewed God, right? So then I wonder, like, how did everybody view God, right? And if that's the case, historically, are the religious Bibles that we have from all around the world just man's descriptions of God, man's relationship with God, man's discovery of creation and creators and just trying to make sense of it all? And if that's the case, it's not actually written by God. And then I start to wonder, then could all of these other religions have their own Like, could it all be the same God, the same creator that we're trying to identify and understand? Maybe God actually sent different prophets to different parts of the world because, language barriers, travel barriers. I mean, there were freaking horses and donkeys and walking and boats, right? Like, we weren't freaking in planes in the Bible days, right? So, and the other religions prior, right? And I'm thinking, if that's the case, then basically I've always wrestled with the idea or thought that, like, dang, if I was born in China, I would have just been screwed, and hopefully God would have saved me over there. Or I would think like that. If I was born in Russia, oh man, that would really suck for me because I just wouldn't have been born into the right faith. And I feel so bad for all those children who are born in the wrong faith. And they really believe those things. They're indoctrinated, right? And then I'm like, if they're indoctrinated, maybe I'm indoctrinated, right? Oh shit. So all of these questions have been stirring for years and years. And the Bible is not the one true word of God anymore. The only thing that I can know for sure is my relationship with God and hearing from him. But he got pretty silent during this time. And I was still trying to believe and hold on to things. And slowly but surely, I remember coming to a point where I just couldn't say that I had faith anymore. But I wanted to. I didn't decide to stop having faith. That didn't happen like that. It was a slow discovery and unraveling over years. Like, I'm telling you, these studies, these in-depth studies started in 2012. And I always had the questions about world religions and stuff. But I had them in trying to prove my own faith and trying to debate and be able to hold strong in what I believed. That was my main topic and reason for everything when I would study other faiths. So 2014, my divorce actually happens in June. I start seeing myself living outside of church as a choice, something that I was doing on purpose. Like, I was choosing to not participate in the congregation anymore. I was a hurt person, but it wasn't the church that hurt me. I was going through a lot with the divorce, and I was dating again. I met my husband, and we got engaged. We got married in 2016, October 15th. And I had a very non-religious ceremony. And I remember just like all the love I felt in that room. And one thing that's very interesting to me is that throughout this journey, my biggest fears have been what the Christian people, if they would still value me. But never once have I really been afraid of leaving faith. There was a coming to, I remember it was one of my birthdays. I was already dating Dan at the time. I don't know if we were married or not, but I was with my friend Alicia also. We went to Six Flags. And I remember, because I no longer believed in hell, and I didn't believe, I was starting to not believe in God. And I remember going on a roller coaster. And when we actually got off that roller coaster, I had to have a conversation because I was like, look, I thought I was going to die. And that was the first time in my life I have ever been afraid of dying. And it was really weird because I used to believe that if I died, I was going to heaven, it was God's will, and I just hoped it wasn't too painful. That was my biggest concern with death, was that it would be a painful death. I didn't want to be tortured or anything crazy, and I didn't want to drown. Drowning sounded like the worst possible way to die. So as I take a deep breath, thinking about that, but I remember thinking like, God, if I get thrown from this roller coaster, I just really hope that I die quick, because my fear then was just that my life would be over, and who would take care of my children? I didn't have a God to trust to take care of my children. I didn't have I didn't know what would happen to my family if I wasn't here. Like, those were the things that I was concerned about because I no longer believed in hell. I wasn't afraid. I never ever thought like, what if I die and I'm wrong? No, I stopped fearing that. When I let go of fear, I let go of it completely. Like, I don't have those fears. My fears now are they're very physical fears, like what's going to happen to my children. And when I die, that could be it. That could be all of it, period. And I want to make sure that I'm leaving behind healthy, happy kids that know what to do with their lives as they grow. So, but yeah, I feared death for the first time because it was the first time it was ever final. It was the first time that I wasn't thinking that I was facing death, the potential of death on a roller coaster, and thinking like, man, this could be it. If I die, it's it. I don't get to do this again. And I remember wanting a belief system. I really did. I wanted a belief system. I wasn't finding it though. And I was looking I was reading books about Buddhism and stuff, and partially reading. Don't let me fool you. Sometimes I only get into like the third chapter of a book, or I start to skip around because I'm bored or distracted, and then I pick up another book, and God only knows. But lots of stuff about Buddhism and studying things online, and I was really connecting with the teachings about love and stuff and not harming people. However, I just like the past lives and everything, like I just don't have anything to go on with that, and I just don't know if I believe in those things. I just don't. If right now where I am in life, if it's not tangible and physical and I can't touch it, I just don't know. Really don't. I'm really, really struggling with that. And I don't want to claim that I know something that I don't know. I already left a faith that was everything to me. The core of everything that I did was God. So rewriting my whole life from this point on, and I'm literally just this week I've been starting to feel like I could actually do that. And this started in 2012. It's almost 2020. We're just a month and a half away from 2020. And I'm just now feeling like I can start writing the next part of my life. This is when I actually was saying it out loud. My dad in 2016, November 2016, actually 11th, which was today, 3 years ago, the doctors tell me I has 1 year to live. And they denied it in the transplant list. But we worked through that, and we got him on the transplant list. And within a week of being on it, he was actually called for a transplant. So March 24th, 2017, my dad gets his lung transplant. So this is significant because during the long 11 months, while he was in the hospital, very, very sick and not recovering well, my dad would ask me to pray for him regularly and stuff. And whenever I would come to visit. And I really, really struggled with this because he had a lot of anxiety. I would sing worship songs and stuff, and I was really trying to keep him calm. And I would pray, but I didn't believe what I was praying. And sometimes I just felt like a phony, because I just didn't have the faith to go with it. And I didn't want to fake it. And I remember, I don't know if I refused to pray or told Dad that I really didn't feel comfortable praying at that time or something, but I was trying to not have that conversation. But I remember my dad just deadlocked me and was like, do you believe in God still? And he was like, are you a Christian? And I had to tell my dad, who's knocking on death's door, that no, I am not a Christian. And I do not believe in the Christian God. I do not know if God exists. I do still feel, at that time at least, that I was still connected to something bigger than myself, but I didn't know what it was or anything. And that was really difficult. But after that, I was finally able to say, I'm agnostic. I don't believe in God. I don't know what I believe. And I was super comfortable not knowing what I believed. And I remember in 2013, I also wrote a blog that was about or a note on my Facebook about not knowing. It's okay to not know. And it was very hard for me to not know things. It still is. And this last, let me see, that was in 2017. I could actually admit out loud it's 2019 now. And I've been saying for about the last year that I for sure did not believe in God. And it's been almost 2 years now. But that was it. That was the beginning of me actually saying that. And this started unraveling in 2012. So it's been a long process. And for the last 2 or 3 years, I've definitely been in a place. It feels like, if I could visualize it, it's like a plateau. It's just like I've come to this place and there's nowhere to go from here. It just kind of like boop, drops off and it's flat. And there's nowhere to go from there, right? And I feel like I have to start figuring out a way to build off of this plateau and build up and out of it. But I feel like I needed to be here, that this is the place I needed to be. I needed to not know things and be comfortable with not knowing things. Be comfortable with walking away, to know that where I am, because when I was leaving faith or falling away from faith, I remember thinking like, this is probably just part of God's plan. He's going to show me what it's like on the other side. And once I figure that out and understand that, I'll be able to help people come to him better and with more clarity. And I'll know what it's like to be without him. He's letting me go on this journey for that reason. And some people who know me probably might still believe that and have hope for me to come back. And who knows? Maybe that's true. And maybe that is part of this process. But for me right now, I do not believe in God, and that has not been my discovery. But when I was leaving faith, those were the things that I was thinking. I never just felt like I wanted to walk away. I wasn't trying to walk away. And trust me when I say this, I was definitely letting go of things before I was just like embracing a sinner's lifestyle. See, the thing is about Christianity is there are specific things that are listed as sin. And some people don't even believe that they are. I know a lot of Christians who have no issue with getting drunk or drinking or cursing or whatever. And I worry that sometimes those who love me that are still in the faith just look and go, this is why she left faith. She just wanted to be a heathen. Not at all. Not even a little bit. I studied my way out of faith, unfortunately. Fortunately, I feel fortunate. I really do. Okay, so I'll go ahead and go into this part too. I've never wanted to be a stumbling block for anybody. One of the reasons I didn't even want to tell my dad, because, my parents are fine with their faith and they're fine in it. I don't want to disturb that. I do feel, though, that I am getting to a place where I'm ready to say these are the dangers and this is the problem with it. And that's going to be another hard part of this journey for me. I really did want to go quietly, and I tried to go quietly the last few years. To be honest, I've been mostly quiet. I've shared some things that have angered me or bothered me, but for the most part, I haven't. I have been very, very silent on the issue of religion. For me, for my personality type, for who I am and my passions, I have been silent. If you've heard me say some things, you're like, she has not been silent. Trust me, I've been silent. The little things that I have said are very minimal compared to the things that I have thought and that I've read and studied. So, I really appreciate those who have listened and who have participated in my life over the years, even with me leaving faith. I respect your right to have your faith, and I respect your faith. I don't want to come between anyone and God or their faith or wherever they are. But I do wish that I could talk about it. I wish that I didn't have to feel so isolated for fear of offending anyone, because people that don't believe in God can just as easily offended by believers as non-believers are, or as believers are by non-believers. So I just think that mutual respect for where we are, and trust me, I know, because I've been there myself, that you feel a great deal of pain and fear for me, because you fear hell and you fear my life without God. I can assure you I am extremely happy. I am living the most financially blessed I've ever been, the happiest that I've ever been. This is key. I am free. I am free. Believe me or not, it doesn't matter. I know how it feels. I know what it looks like on me. I'm free, and it's amazing. I am free from indoctrination. I am free from fear. I am free. I am free. I am free. I am free. And I've always been free from things within religion. I made it my mission to not be bound by things. But even the little bit that I did have that I carried, and the indoctrination, I hate to say it, but I was raised in the church since the time I was 2. My parents got saved when I was 2. And indoctrination is a big thing. You cannot just change that mindset. It takes years, years and years to actually be free from it. So to those who have left faith and totally feel me, thanks for listening. To those who haven't and have questions or want to talk, I'm totally here. Even if you want to stay in your faith, I think it's important to ask questions. But wherever you are, and to those that I still love dearly that are in faith, thank you for being a part of my life and respecting my path and where I am. And I'll continue to respect you even when we disagree. So yes, this has been my descent from faith. And I'll probably try to actually write it out, do something with these bullet points in a way that can be a little more moving than reading bullet points. But yeah, this is where I am.